Do I sit down?
Yeah, you sit down and you answer your question.
Hi.
We're gonna. So you can sit back down. Sit back down.
Hi, I'm Kiana, and I'm a surf lifesaver. My name is Tove.
Hey everyone, my name's Anya, and I'm in year 11.
An endeavour to me means to explore a problem, to figure out a way to fix it.
To me, endeavour is about becoming the best version of yourself through like the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, which is really important for a documentary, I think.
Take 3. Hello, my name is Jackie Tilsley and I'm a science teacher. Originally, I was going to say the dictionary word of the meaning endeavour, but I changed my mind. This is obviously an endeavour because we're all collaborating on this project, but I think this is more than that. It's just an exciting adventure. So, let's get to it!
After meeting at school and splitting off into separate cars, we head off to our destination to meet Scott Hetherington, leader of biodiversity in the Tweed region, to gain his expertise on the effect of the koala's declining population and issues that they face in the Tweed region. A positive change was achieved through a collaboration between the Tweed Council and Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary to vaccinate and analyse population changes. Through a government grant at Cotton Beach Koala Reserve, they have been able to plant trees for vegetation, fund the sanctuary, and increase habitat size. Scott will give us more insight on the importance of keeping this ecosystem alive and the scope of the issue.
Yeah, so koalas or all species are given a level of threatened status that changes from place to place. So in the Tweed, what they're captured by is the state government legislation. And so as a population across the state, they're considered vulnerable. But on the Tweed coast, we've got an endangered population. So what that means is that we've recognised that there are particular things going on for the Tweed Byron koalas that are a higher level of threat than for the rest. Recently, the federal government has just actually listed all of them as endangered. So, you know, one way or another, they're up there in those categories that really means that, you know, that they're on the high chance of being extinct by 2050.
How does habitat loss and fragmentation affect koalas?
Well, primarily it's that thing where that it's their food. So you're just taking away their food, you're taking away their home, so they're very faithful to a particular little patch of trees. They have quite small home ranges, so they'll have a particular set of trees, and they're real fussy, and they like particular trees. So by you know that's the main impact, is you're taking away their food, you're taking away their place to live. What then happens, the second part of your question there about the impact of fragmentation, is that those bits of habitat that are left, that once they realise that, oh, my tree's gone, but I can probably eat over there, to get from here to there, they've got to go along the ground more than they, you know, would prefer, which exposes them to dogs and cars. And over time, given the added level of energy it takes to get the nutrients they need, increases their stress levels and exposes them to the disease as well.
What effect has urbanisation had on the koala population in the Tweed? For example, the development of new suburbs behind Kingsford.
Yeah, it's interesting on the Tweed. I think that the situation we're in is that it's actually probably not been the urbanisation that's made the impact. It was before that. So it was clearing of the lowland, all of the Tweed Valley for sugarcane, and a lot of the coastal impacts that have happened out of sand mining. The urban areas have kind of filled in around that, but the areas of habitat that we retained are still there. What's happened since then is it's increased threats. So now that there are people living, you know, up against the habitat, more cars, more dogs, and more likelihood of inappropriate fire. One of the impacts of having houses near bushland is it makes it harder to actually keep the hazard level down of the forest, makes it harder to do hazard reduction burns and keep the fuel down. And so what we've seen on the Tweed coast is that we had devastating wildfires in this area in 2004 and 2009, and they are probably what contributed mainly to a major decline in koalas that we're just inching our way back from, since we haven't had a major fire since 2009.
How does the transmission of disease affect the koalas?
The transmission of disease affects the koalas in quite a few ways. So there are some immediate, what they call symptoms, and so they get conjunctivitis, and they can, to the extent that they can become blind. They also get a really terrible cystitis, which affects their urinary system, but also their reproductive system, and so the females can become sterile. So it's, you know, it's painful and debilitating, and, you know, and makes them susceptible to other diseases. And there are some other diseases that they suspect are becoming more prevalent because of how many koalas are suffering from the chlamydia.
How does urbanisation affect the wider animal population?
In the same way, so urbanisation affects all wildlife in a similar way. And one of the things that, you know, we really are mindful of when we're talking about koalas all the time and working on koalas all the time is that everything we do for that has benefit for other species. And so this site that we're visiting today, even though primarily we're focusing on what can we do to help koalas, it is, you know, fantastic habitat for a whole range of other things. You know, the bird life here is remarkable. There's great frogs, there's other mammals, there's a cool little species called a planigale, which, if you think about a Tassie devil, everyone would know a Tassie devil. The planigale is the smallest version of a Tassie devil, and it's like this big, but it thinks it'll eat ya. It thinks it can take you out. Sharp little teeth, and so they live here, and so you know, where we're able to look after the habitat and manage those impacts of urbanisation, we can actually provide for a whole range of species. The estate, the residential estate that's around here, because there's no cats and dogs, because there's a certain amount of traffic coming. I've been working in wildlife and wildlife management for 25 years, and this is the only place where I've seen a family of wood ducks raise all 13 young. So if you transpose that into so we would think of wood duck as a really common species, and in every other suburb, you know, throughout the east coast of Australia, we would go, wood ducks are everywhere. But what's actually going on is that, you know, they might only get 2 or 3 of their young to adulthood, whereas here we take away the threats. You get all 13 all the way through. It's a really simple one. It's a bit like the story with the humpback whales. You know, you just stop killing them and they go really well. You know,
Yeah, so anything that students in general can do just to minimise their impact on the koalas of the Tweed. Obviously, we can talk to councils and stuff like that. Is there anything they can do in their everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really exciting about what your team are working on right now is telling those stories. So all of this stuff is going on. There are some fantastic things going on in your community in the Tweed. And if you can spend some more time doing what you're doing and talking to the people that are doing that and sharing those stories, I think that's one of the most impactful things you can actually do. You can do all those little things yourself, you know, all those little decisions you make. Will I buy this thing that's covered in plastic or this thing that's not, you know? Will I tell the shop that I'm going to that I'd prefer to, you know, bring my own containers, thanks? Do you get involved? There are some fantastic volunteer groups in the Tweed doing, you know, wildlife rehabilitation or tree planting. So there are all those kind of things. But I think, you know, your generation, with the information that you've got around what's going on in the environment, around communicating and engaging with others, there's a great opportunity there to really have a big impact by telling these stories and sharing that information.
What does endeavour mean to you?
Well, endeavour to me is, this place really represents it. You know, endeavour to me is, you know, having an idea, trying to make a difference and working steadily towards it. And one of the things that I've really learnt over my time, and it's kind of me justifying, you know, getting older and going, you know, there's good things about this, is that you do see that there are a whole lot of lessons you've learned along the way. and you can apply them and understand that it takes a long time. Takes, it's a long-term thing, and so for me to endeavour is just to keep on trying and we have a joke in our office, on a Friday afternoon, we didn't save the planet this week, we have to come back on Monday and keep on working. So that's how endeavour means to me, is just to keep on trying.
Koalas are particularly vulnerable to the effects of urbanisation. This is because they are extremely fussy eaters and favour a specific patch of trees. Urbanisation is one of the many issues that fall under the main umbrella term habitat fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation is when large expanses of habitat are isolated into smaller patches through its effect of subdividing habitats. Fragmentation in the Tweed region has been exacerbated by urban expansion, deforestation and bushfires, all of which impact the food sources available to koalas. The reduction of resources and trees increase the amount of stress these koalas experience, making them vulnerable to bacterial infections such as chlamydia. This infamous disease weakens the immune system and causes various problems, including blindness, female infertility, and in some cases, death. Chlamydia has a major impact on the koala population. However, vaccination programs are in place. Koalas need to be held for 30 days between their first and second shots before they are released into the wild. These programs have helped to stabilise and track koala populations. Scott's team aims to raise awareness for the complex issues threatening koalas and provide assistance to those in need. Rhett Brambleby is a marine biologist who is driven to educate the community on the unique ecosystem of the foreshore. Following his father's legacy as a coastal ecology educator, Rhett spreads awareness of the issues Hastings Point faces, compounded by human population growth. We visited the headland, the dune system, and the rocky foreshore. Rhett believes that the ecological damage may be attributed by several factors, including population increase, residential expansion, and ongoing climate change.
Okay, well, my name's Rhett Brambleby. I have a long connection with Hastings Point. In fact, I've been coming here since I was in nappies pretty much. My father has been a great advocate and educator at Hastings Point since about the 1970s. So I guess you could say that what I do is a coastal ecology educator, if you like. We run a lot of education programs and field trips, excursions for everywhere from little kids, primary schools, all the way up to high schools, special interest groups, where we basically run field trips in this beautiful place, Hastings Point, as well as having this great room up here to share insights and to learn from.
In your opinion, what is the greatest issue facing coastlines today?
I would say that all over the world, and particularly at Hastings Point, we can probably have a central issue, which is simply human population growth. And with that issue comes a whole range of impacts. A little place like Hastings Point, of course, is juggling a growing population on the Tweed coast over the years to come. And so everything we saw this morning, from the wearing out of tracks, from the loss of habitat, potential pollution coming in, rubbish left around, all of these, of course, only increase over the years as more humans come into the area. So on a global scale, human population pressure is once again, I would say, the driving force that's putting pressure on the rest of the ecosystems. And I would say definitely at a place like Hastings Point, with its projected growth, human population growth, that it is simply the range of pressures that happen when more and more humans come into the area. You certainly get to see that at Hastings Point. There's it really is a place that is right on a knife's edge between having some beautiful ecology here, but trying to accommodate more and more people that come in for holidays, residential, all sorts of reasons.
How is climate change affecting the issues on the rock platform?
Great question. Well, climate change obviously is one of those big picture issues. So it's not the sort of thing that we necessarily have, we can mitigate it much in here, but it's very relevant to our coastline here. An ecosystem like the mangroves, as the sea level rises, naturally, ecosystems like mangroves migrate inland. Okay, so they simply find more habitats a bit further inland. The same way that on a beach, if the sea levels rise as well, basically the beach ecology can shift back a stage. Now, one of the problems that happens, and areas like the Gold Coast are a great example of that, is that if we have got lots of buildings along here, there's nowhere for this system to migrate inland. It starts to get sandwiched between human habitations, rising sea levels, and the range of that habitat's going to decrease. The same in the mangroves. If we had developments up here, then there's nowhere for those mangroves to naturally retreat where they would retreat on a sea level rise. So this is about maybe careful planning, where you would allow room for these systems to be able to do what they naturally would, which is grow further or extend out if the sea level is dropping. The other thing about climate change, and this is probably particularly for our marine environments here, is that where we are geographically is significant because we're right in the transition zone between the subtropics to the north and temperate to the south. These are called biomes, or regions of different sort of, I guess, climatic regions. So we're in that transition zone here, which is great because it means we get species from both that can come and live at the rocky shore. But one of the effects that we're looking at from climate change, of course, is this area becoming more subtropical. So it wouldn't take much to start shifting that transition zone further down the coast. I feel as though that would have a big effect on the ecology on the rocky shore, because a lot of the plant life that really makes the reef here, so this is a rocky reef, it has got lots of plant life there. Now, a lot of those plants are actually from the colder regions, from the temperate regions. So if we started to get more warming, we might find that the mix of plant life that makes up that will change. It will become a little bit more like maybe Noosa. And if you go to the rock pools at Noosa, it's a different sort of ecology. We're very lucky to have these temperate reefs here that have a lot of plant life, as well as some of the species. Like I said, we get subtropical species. Some of the fish you'll see there maybe filming today are subtropical, so they can come and live here. Temperate species can come and live here. Now over here in the mangroves are basically a subtropical tropical species. So when we talk about mangroves, we're talking up to about 70 species of tree that can occupy these very tricky, salty, muddy zones on the coastline. Now, we've got basically 4 species that live at Hastings Point. As you go further south, you get fewer and fewer mangrove species, till we just get one that can actually make its way almost down towards Melbourne. The grey mangrove makes it down that far. But as we go further north, the number of species increases quickly. Okay, so that's another change I would say. Over the years to come, we might find the mix of species in the mangrove forest changing. We might get more of the tropical red mangrove, which we do have a few of. But once again, it'll be interesting to see how that changes. But I shudder to think what will happen if we do get the Irukandji's jellyfish coming down this far south, because now it's at Fraser Island. So we might be in for a few unexpected pests coming, or not pests, but that will change the whole equation down here of swimming with very deadly sea jellies like the Irukandji's coming down. So once again, that's all to be seen in the years to come as to what extent we do see that changing.
There's been a lot of discussion in the media recently about microplastics leaving carbon in human blood. How do you think that the marine environment is affected by this?
Great. Okay, so microplastics, and of course plastic, we saw some of it on our walk around today. I think you can pretty much, if you had a good look around just about any beach now, you will find it. In fact, they even analyse the sand through microscopes, and if you look at it on that level, you'll start to see all sorts of tiny little parts of plastic. So, a few issues with plastic in a marine environment. Obviously, when it is in more of a solid form before it's broken up, we have the issues of course, turtles mistaking it for food. We do have a specimen of a turtle that was overrun by barnacles. So one of the things that happens with turtles is that they will often dive to the bottom and rub themselves in the sand to knock off things like barnacle larvae that might be growing on them. Now, if they eat too much plastic, they become overbuoyant and they can't dive as effectively, and the barnacle larva will start getting into their eyes, through their mouth. They won't be able to rub it off, and that can start to overwhelm them. But as the plastic breaks down, obviously, it starts to break into tinier and tinier fragments. And In a place like the Rocky Shore, there are lots of organisms that live down here attached to the rocks called filter feeders. Okay, now a filter feeder is a marine animal that is able to filter out little particles of plankton and other organic matter, basically microparticles in the sea of anything that is living or was living. There's nutrients in that. And so filter feeders are subject to inadvertently taking plastic into their systems, these tiny little microplastics that, like we were saying, they're starting to find it. You mentioned in human blood, even. That's incredible. But even in plankton, zooplankton, they're finding little fragments of plastic. So as plastic moves through the food webs, this is another great unknown. One of the things with plastic is that it often floats, and it often attracts pollutants to its surface. Plastic is basically an oil-based substance, and oils attract oils. So if you've got oily slicks on the surface of the ocean, unfortunately each little bit of plastic actually can coat itself in pollutants and chemicals. And so this is also one of the problems is that with animals ingesting plastic, there's also the potential to build up toxins in the food chain as it gets passed from one animal to another. So a lot of research being done about that. And obviously, there's the big question of how do we mitigate things like that? How do we, accept that challenge and rise to it? I know some of the areas around here are becoming no plastic bag zones, so that's great. We talked about our Take 3 for the Sea program, trying to get everyone to think about picking up 3 bits of plastic as they go walking. But obviously, that's limited in its scope, because on this side, we're connected to the rest of the planet, of course, via that ocean. So we can be getting plastic coming through from remote ecosystems that will make its way up onto this zone here. So I guess there is really a bit like climate change, having to have a global counterpart where, as a planet, we are dealing with this problem. But like I said, you go to many beaches around the world, and you'll think this one's pristine for the amount of or the lack of rubbish on it. So that's great. But like we said, more people means more rubbish. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but a few times now over the years I've literally been driving along the road and just seen someone lob a nice coffee bottle out of their car. So you still see that stuff going on around the place. So, ongoing issue.
Thanks to Rhett, we have learned more about the range of ecological impacts in our coastal region. Hastings Point is one of the many coastal areas in Australia and around the world that has been affected greatly by human population growth. The expansion of homes along coastlines has placed pressure on beach ecology and mangrove systems, with rising sea levels trapping these ecosystems between the sea and human habitations. Climate change has also played a significant role in the fluctuation of climatic regions, introducing new plant and animal species with warming temperatures. Synthetic materials such as microplastics have been discovered in smaller marine life, affecting the food chain and poisoning our seafood diet. Luckily, there are different programs working to reduce plastic pollution in the ocean. Take 3 for the Sea is a registered Australian charity that encourages communities to donate, educate, and most importantly, take 3 pieces of rubbish with them every time they visit the beach. This small contribution has helped to reduce plastic in the food chain and keep our coastal environments clean.
This documentary was all about understanding the world that we live around. And through this, we were able to see the cause and effect of what humans impact on our ecosystem. And through our knowledge, we can become a catalyst for change. What's really great about this documentary is that we had Miss Tilsley on board, who has so much knowledge, and just seeing her just full on lick the mangroves to just determine which ones are the red mangroves and which ones are the grey, it was amazing.
Hi, Miss, do you want to... Hi, I'm Canopy.
Nice to meet you.
Guys, this is Miss Tilsley.
Hello.
Our star celebrity of the show. And...
Ask me a question.
Okay, Miss, why are metaphors so important, and how do they help in capturing carbon?
Well, actually, Kiana, they capture oxygen because the soil is always inundated with water, and as a consequence of that, the oxygen levels are really low. And for the roots to get adequate supply of oxygen, they have to poke up out of the water. So all of those little pointy things down there are called pneumatophores.
Okay, so how would, if a normal, say, tree compare to a mangrove in the ability to capture carbon?
Mangroves capture more carbon dioxide than most Australian natives, but the really important part of the mangrove ecosystem is the soil. So mangroves have a very high leaf drop, which means there's a large amount of decomposing organic matter in the soil, and that means the soil is capturing carbon. So it's important to maintain these ecosystems. If they are excavated for coastal development, then as they are excavated, all that carbon is released into the atmosphere, which contributes to global warming.
Miss, why are mangroves such a fantastic ecosystem, and how do they create habitats?
Well, the main type of habitat they produce is around the pneumatophores. So at high tide, you'll see lots of fish in here, whether they're that kind of pneumatophore or another species type. And fish lay their eggs amongst the pneumatophores because they're protected from predators. Most fish would swim into this estuarine environment and lay their eggs here, not their legs. Yeah. There's lots of fish here. It's like a fish nursery.
So if we were to take away this ecosystem, so if we were to take away the mangroves for habitat or for their wood, what would that mean with the fish cycle or any cycle?
I think that would mean that there's limited areas for them to lay their eggs. So the fish stocks of fish that are just out in the estuary would decrease. And if this is excavated, we're increasing the carbon in the atmosphere.
Don't fall over. Okay, so after completing this experience, Endeavour to me means like actively going out of your way to find ways to help others, and just like helping the community around us and even the environment who are like suffering so horribly at the moment, as we've like seen through the course of this documentary. The highlight of my journey was definitely meeting like the amazing people who are running these amazing initiatives, such as Scott and Rhett, who really just inspired me to be able to find meaning through the marine life.
To me, Endeavour is understanding our exploration of ecosystems around the Tweed area. My favourite part was probably going outside of the school into our community and meeting all these experienced individuals that help me understand what's going on in our ecosystem.
Most students know that David Attenborough is my boyfriend. And so when Mr. Lill circulated an email asking for volunteers to run a documentary, I was like, pick me, pick me. And I imagined that I would be the director of the movie. But little did I realise that the girls that I had chosen for this documentary were so fiercely independent, they weren't in the slightest bit interested in my ideas. So on the last day of filming, and this is true, I thought, I'm just like their mum, driving them around from location to location. But I've actually been thinking about that word endeavour quite a lot, and I think these girls, who I can't look at, really embody the true spirit of what it means to endeavour to do something.
Thank you for coming to the premiere.
We hope that you can gain some valuable information from this.
We've worked quite a lot of hours on this and we're really glad that it finally reached the screen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was way too comfortable.
Woohoo!